When you discover that she has cheated, the very first impulse for most men is denial. The mind wants to push away the reality because the pain feels unbearable. Denial is a defense mechanism, a psychological shield that prevents us from immediately collapsing under the weight of betrayal. But here's the paradox: the longer you stay in denial, the deeper the wound festers. It's like ignoring a fracture in your arm. You can cover it up, pretend it's not there, even convince yourself that it's just a minor bruise. But every time you move, you're reminded of the break. And the more you avoid facing it, the harder it becomes to heal. Acknowledging betrayal is painful, yes, but it's also liberating. Because when you confront the truth directly, you reclaim clarity. You stop living in the fog of excuses, lies, and self-deception. Psychology teaches us that the mind craves certainty, even if that certainty is painful. It's uncertainty that eats away at your spirit, that gnawing voice that whispers, maybe it wasn't real, maybe it was just a mistake, maybe I should give her another chance without even asking the right questions. But when you choose acknowledgement, you cut through that fog with a sharp blade. You say to yourself, yes, this happened. I didn't imagine it. I'm not crazy, and I will not waste my life pretending otherwise. Now, acknowledgement does not mean condoning. It doesn't mean you accept her behavior as right. It simply means you refuse to blindfold yourself in order to escape the sting of truth. There's a psychological strength in looking betrayal in the eye and saying, I see you. I will not deny you, but I will not be defined by you either. Think about how many men crumble at this stage. They can't bear the reality, so they create illusions. They cling to the idea that maybe she slipped up once, maybe it was alcohol, maybe it was just texting and not physical. They shrink their own boundaries to accommodate her disloyalty because they fear the consequences of facing the truth, being alone, starting over, admitting that the woman they trusted betrayed them. But here's what's even more damaging than the betrayal itself: living in a self-constructed illusion that robs you of your self-respect. Philosophers like Nietzsche have long emphasized the power of facing truth, even when it burns. He said, to live is to suffer, to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. Betrayal is suffering, but if you acknowledge it, you gain the chance to extract meaning, to learn, to grow, to harden your foundation. If you run from it, you simply extend the suffering indefinitely, stuck in a limbo between truth and denial. Acknowledgement also strips her actions of their hidden power, because secrecy is the lifeblood of betrayal. Cheating thrives in the shadows, in unspoken doubts, in things swept under the rug. The moment you shine light on it, internally first, and then externally if you must, you rob it of its ability to control you. She may have deceived you, but she cannot manipulate you into denying what your eyes and instincts already know. And that is where your power begins, in the refusal to be gaslit, even by yourself. But here's an even deeper layer to acknowledgement. It is not just about admitting she betrayed you. It's also about admitting how it makes you feel. Too often, men are conditioned to bury their emotions, to pretend that betrayal doesn't cut them, to act like they're too strong to care. That is not strength. That is suppression. Real strength is standing in front of the mirror and saying, yes, I am hurt. Yes, this cuts me deeply. Yes, I feel anger, sadness, humiliation. Because only by acknowledging your emotions can you process them. What you refuse to feel will only find darker ways to express itself: rage, distrust, self-sabotage. What you allow yourself to feel, you can eventually release. Acknowledgement then is not just intellectual clarity, it's emotional honesty. You stop running from the truth outside and the truth inside. And from that place of honesty, you begin to rebuild. Without it, every step you take afterward will be shaky because it's built on the unstable ground of denial. There's another dimension here. Acknowledgement protects your future self. If you face the betrayal now, you inoculate yourself against repeating the same mistakes. You learn to see red flags sooner, to trust your instincts, to value loyalty at a deeper level. But if you deny it, you doom yourself to repeat the cycle, because unacknowledged wounds have a way of bleeding into new relationships. And let's not forget, the act of acknowledgement is also a declaration of dignity. You're saying to yourself, I will not live in a fantasy. I will not allow fear to make me blind. I would rather face a painful truth than live in a comfortable lie. That decision alone separates men who grow from men who wither. So when betrayal happens and you feel your mind trying to escape into denial, stop yourself. Stand firm. Speak the truth plainly. She cheated. It happened. I did not deserve it, and I will not lie to myself about it. This is the foundation for every other step: detachment, boundaries, growth. Because without acknowledgement, none of those are possible. You cannot detach from what you pretend isn't real. You cannot set boundaries against what you refuse to name. You cannot grow from what you deny ever existed. The path forward begins here, with your eyes open, your voice steady, your mind clear. Betrayal may have entered your life, but you decide whether it will dominate your life. And that decision begins with a single act, acknowledging reality, no matter how much it hurts. And once you do, something shifts, the fog lifts, the illusions fall apart. The pain is still there, but now it is pain with direction, pain that can be transformed, pain that can carve you into someone stronger. So remember this: denial delays healing, but acknowledgement begins it. When you choose truth over illusion, you've already taken the first step toward freedom. Face it, name it, own it. And in that act of acknowledgement, you will discover that betrayal does not define you. It refines you. Once the reality of betrayal has been acknowledged, the next challenge is one that often separates those who crumble from those who rise: the ability to detach emotionally. This is where most men falter, not because they are weak, but because our instincts push us toward immediate emotional reaction. Betrayal triggers some of the strongest emotions a human being can experience: rage, humiliation, sorrow, a sense of inadequacy. These emotions rush in like a storm, and if you don't learn to step outside of them, they will dictate your every move. Think about what happens in that moment. A man finds out that his partner has been unfaithful, and suddenly his emotions hijack him. One man falls into desperation, begging her to stay, pleading for love that has already been desecrated. Another burns with rage, lashing out, perhaps seeking revenge, consumed by fantasies of retaliation. Both men, though they take different paths, are trapped by the same problem. They have given their emotions complete control. They are not responding, they are reacting. And reaction, while human, is rarely wise. Psychology has a simple but profound truth: the person who controls his emotions controls the situation. Emotional detachment is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It is about reclaiming your power. It's about refusing to let someone else's betrayal determine your next move. Detachment gives you the distance you need to see clearly, to think rationally, and to make choices that align with your dignity rather than your pain. But let's be clear, detachment is not the absence of feeling. You cannot stop yourself from hurting, nor should you. What you can stop is the surrender to those emotions, the mindless impulse to act on them as if they were commands. Emotional detachment is the discipline of creating space between what you feel and what you do. You acknowledge the storm inside, but you don't let it steer the ship. Philosophers like the Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you may not control external events, but you can control your mind. Betrayal is the external event. You did not choose it, you could not prevent it, and you cannot undo it. But what you can master is the one domain always within your reach, your inner state. And when you detach, you are essentially saying, I will not hand over control of my mind to someone who could not even control their loyalty. That is strength. Now, many men confuse detachment with indifference. They think it means shutting off completely, pretending nothing happened, burying the pain. But that is not detachment. That is suppression. Suppression is fragile, it cracks under pressure. True detachment is a conscious stance. You feel the emotions fully, but you refuse to let them dictate your decisions. You can feel anger without becoming consumed by vengeance. You can feel sorrow without collapsing into desperation. You can feel humiliation without sacrificing your self-respect. Why does this matter so much? Because the way you respond in these moments sets the tone for your healing. If you respond with begging, you reinforce a dynamic where your value depends on her acceptance. If you respond with vengeance, you tie your energy to her actions indefinitely, dragging yourself down into bitterness. But if you respond with calm detachment, you signal to yourself and to her that your worth is not negotiable and your dignity is not for sale. Detachment is not passive. It is one of the most active choices you can make because it requires immense discipline. Imagine standing face to face with someone who has wounded you deeply, and instead of exploding or collapsing, you maintain composure. That is not weakness. That is the highest form of strength. Because anyone can lose control, but not everyone can master themselves. And here's the deeper psychological truth: when you detach emotionally, you also create the conditions for clarity. When the fog of raw emotion lifts, you can begin to analyze the situation with sharper vision. You can ask yourself the important questions. What does this betrayal reveal about her character? What does it reveal about my boundaries? What does it teach me about the kind of relationship I want to build in the future? You cannot ask those questions while drowning in rage or sorrow. Detachment gives you the mental oxygen to reflect. Another benefit is this detachment keeps you from being manipulated. Cheaters often attempt to twist the narrative, to justify their actions, to shift the blame onto you. They rely on your emotional chaos to blur your judgment. If you are begging, raging, or despairing, you are vulnerable to their spin. But if you remain detached, calm, and steady, their words lose their grip. You can see their excuses for what they are: projections, deflections, and rationalizations. And perhaps most importantly, detachment preserves your dignity. No matter how much pain you feel, you remain composed. You don't let betrayal drag you beneath your own standards. You show yourself that even in heartbreak, you are capable of self-control. And that is a gift you give not only to yourself in the present, but also to your future self, who will look back and say, I handled one of the most painful experiences of my life with strength, not weakness. Oh, of course, detachment takes practice. It does not happen overnight. But every time you choose to pause before reacting, every time you choose silence over outburst, every time you choose composure over chaos, you strengthen the muscle of emotional self-mastery. And over time, that mastery becomes unshakable. So in the face of betrayal, remember this: the storm of emotions is inevitable, but whether you let the storm control you is your choice. You can collapse under it, or you can stand in the center of it, steady, unshaken, untouchable. That is what emotional detachment looks like. And when you achieve that, something remarkable happens. You begin to realize that while she may have betrayed you, she cannot break you. Her disloyalty may wound your heart, but it cannot conquer your mind. That power belongs only to you. Detach. Reclaim your power. Let your response be a reflection of your strength, not your wounds. In doing so, you rise above betrayal, not as a victim, but as a man who cannot be broken by another's weakness. Once you've faced the betrayal and begun to detach emotionally, the next step is one that demands intellectual clarity, understanding the psychological motives behind cheating. Too often, when someone is betrayed, the instinct is to turn all of the blame inward. The mind whispers questions like, was I not enough? Did I fail to satisfy her? Was there something wrong with me? These are natural questions, but they are dangerous because they subtly shift responsibility for her choices onto your shoulders. And here's the truth: infidelity often says far more about the betrayer's psychology than it ever says about the betrayed. To grasp this, you need to recognize that cheating is rarely about one single factor. It is a pattern, a reflection of internal dynamics within her. Some people cheat because they crave validation. They seek constant affirmation of their desirability, and loyalty feels suffocating because it demands consistency rather than novelty. Others cheat out of immaturity, lacking the emotional discipline to handle the natural temptations and challenges that exist in every relationship. Still others cheat because they are driven by avoidance. They fear intimacy, and when the relationship grows too real or too vulnerable, they run to distraction instead of facing their own insecurities. Psychology reminds us that human behavior is rarely random. It emerges from unmet needs, unresolved conflicts, and habitual patterns. In the case of infidelity, the act of cheating often reveals more about her inability to manage her inner world than about any deficiency in you. Understanding this is liberating because it reframes the betrayal. Instead of asking, why wasn't I good enough? The more accurate question becomes, what does her behavior reveal about her state of mind, her level of maturity, her values? This shift is critical because self-blame is one of the most destructive responses to betrayal. It eats away at confidence, breeding insecurity that can carry into future relationships. If you internalize her betrayal as a statement about your worth, you hand over your self-esteem to someone who already failed to honor it. But if you understand that her cheating stems from her psychological struggles, you free yourself from unnecessary guilt. You may not be perfect. No one is. But her disloyalty was her choice, born from her weaknesses, not from your inadequacy. There's another layer here worth considering: the psychological culture that surrounds modern relationships. We live in an age of instant gratification, where temptation is always a swipe away and where self-discipline is often less developed than self-indulgence. Many people, instead of cultivating the ability to resist distraction, give in at the first sign of opportunity. This does not excuse betrayal, but it does explain it. Cheating is often not about deep dissatisfaction, but about poor impulse control. And impulse control is a reflection of character, not of partner quality. Think about this: if someone cannot resist short-term pleasure even at the cost of long-term trust, What does that say about their maturity? It shows a fractured psychology, an inability to prioritize loyalty over desire. And when you see it that way, you realize something profound. You were not betrayed because you lacked value, but because she lacked discipline. That realization shifts the weight off your shoulders. But let's go even deeper. Some people cheat not because they want someone else, but because they are running from themselves. They fear stillness, they fear intimacy, they fear being truly seen. So they seek escape in novelty, in secrecy, in betrayal. It's less about you and more about their inability to sit with who they are. If anything, this kind of cheating reveals not your insufficiency, but the hollowness of their inner life. And when you understand this, you no longer interpret betrayal as proof of your weakness. You see it as exposure of theirs. Philosophically, this reminds us of an important truth. People do not betray you because of who you are. They betray because of who they are. Betrayal is not a mirror. It is a window. It does not reflect your value. It reveals their character. This perspective is essential because it allows you to step back and analyze without drowning in shame. Instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" you begin to ask, "What patterns of thought and behavior would lead someone to destroy trust so carelessly?" That is a question rooted in psychology, not self-punishment. And here's the empowering part. Once you see betrayal through this lens, you begin to recognize it as diagnostic. It diagnoses her lack of loyalty, her lack of discipline, her lack of alignment with your values. And that clarity gives you the strength to move forward without carrying unnecessary weight. You stop asking, "What if I had done more?" And instead you say, "If she could not honor commitment, then she revealed her truth, and I must honor mine." Understanding the psychological motives behind cheating also protects you in the future. When you see the patterns clearly, you become better at spotting red flags early. You recognize the signs of insecurity, immaturity, and avoidance in others, and you choose more wisely. Betrayal then becomes not just a wound, but also a lesson. It sharpens your discernment, teaching you to value loyalty not just as a word, but as a psychological quality you must seek in any partner. Of course, understanding her motives does not mean excusing them. You can empathize with her struggles without justifying her betrayal. You can acknowledge that she may have been acting out of insecurity or immaturity, while still holding firm that her choices violated your trust. In fact, true understanding makes it easier to walk away because you no longer cling to the illusion that if you had only been better, things would have been different. You see that the issue was never fully about you. It was about her readiness, her character, her psychology. And that is the great liberation, because when you stop blaming yourself for another person's betrayal, you reclaim your confidence. You realize that loyalty is not something you earn by being perfect. It is something the other person gives by being honorable. And if they could not give it, then their failure is not your burden to carry. So let this sink in. When someone cheats, they expose themselves more than they expose you. They reveal the cracks in their character, not in your worth. And once you understand that, you stand taller, freer, unburdened by the chains of misplaced guilt. Betrayal is not a verdict on your value. It is a revelation of theirs. See it for what it is, and never again confuse someone else's weakness with your worth. Once you understand that her betrayal says more about her character than about your worth, the next task is to protect your self-worth and your boundaries. This is where many men fail, not because they lack strength, but because betrayal is disorienting. It makes you question yourself. It blurs your sense of reality, and in that confusion, it's easy to start lowering the very standards that once defined you. But here's the truth. If you don't protect your self-worth in the aftermath of betrayal, you allow the wound to spread into every area of your life. Boundaries are not just rules you set for other people. They are expressions of how much you value yourself. When someone crosses those boundaries, especially through betrayal, you face a choice. Do you reinforce them, or do you collapse them in fear of losing the relationship? If you collapse them, you send a message not just to her, but to yourself, that your dignity is negotiable, that your self-respect can be bargained away, and nothing corrodes a man's spirit faster than the belief that his worth depends on someone else's loyalty. Psychologically, betrayal often activates what we call fawning behavior. This is the instinct to appease, to please, to do whatever it takes to regain the affection that was lost. You see this when men beg for another chance, promise to change, or even accept blame that isn't theirs. They shrink their own boundaries to avoid the pain of abandonment. But the irony is that this very behavior deepens the wound. It erodes their self-respect and places all power in the hands of the one who betrayed them. The healthier response is to reinforce your boundaries in the face of betrayal. To say, this is the line, you crossed it, and my self-worth will not allow me to excuse it. That act is not about punishing her, it's about protecting you. Boundaries are psychological shields. They guard your dignity. They remind you of your value. They ensure that betrayal does not redefine who you are. Think about it like this. Your self-worth is the foundation of your identity. When someone cheats, they don't just hurt you emotionally. They attack that foundation. They make you feel less valuable, less desirable, less significant. If you let that belief take root, you start living in alignment with it. You tolerate less respect, you accept half-hearted love, you settle for relationships that drain you. But when you protect your self-worth fiercely, you refuse to let betrayal dictate your identity. You remind yourself, I was worthy before this betrayal, and I remain worthy after it. My value does not vanish because someone else failed to honor it. Philosophically, this is the essence of self-sovereignty. A sovereign man does not hand over the keys to his worth. He does not allow the opinion or actions of others to define his dignity. Betrayal may shake him, but it cannot erase the truth of who he is. Protecting your self-worth, then, is an act of sovereignty. It is a declaration that your value is not for negotiation, not for debate, not for compromise. But how do you do this in practice? You do it by holding the line even when it hurts. That may mean walking away from a relationship that you once believed in. That may mean enduring loneliness rather than settling for disloyalty. That may mean facing the pain of letting go in order to preserve your dignity. Pain is temporary, but self-respect is permanent. And when you choose dignity over desperation, the pain eventually fades, leaving behind strength instead of regret. Let's not sugarcoat it. Protecting your boundaries will test you. It will tempt you to bend them, to rationalize, to forgive without accountability, to accept less than you deserve. But every time you reinforce them, you grow stronger. Every time you say, no, my worth is not negotiable, you carve that truth deeper into your psyche. And over time, you build an unshakable confidence that betrayal cannot destroy. There's also another dimension. Protecting your boundaries is not only about what you won't accept from others, it's also about what you will demand from yourself. Self-worth is maintained through self-discipline. If you continue to chase after someone who betrayed you, if you continue to tolerate disrespect, you are betraying yourself. But when you choose discipline, choosing to walk away, choosing to hold firm, you align your actions with your worth, and that alignment creates inner peace. Remember this: love without respect is not love. Commitment without loyalty is not commitment. And forgiveness without accountability is not healing. It's self-betrayal. Protecting your boundaries means refusing to settle for hollow versions of these values. You demand the real thing, or you walk away with your dignity intact. Psychologically, people will always treat you at the level you demand to be treated. If you tolerate betrayal, you invite more of it. If you enforce boundaries, you teach others how to value you. In that sense, betrayal can become a mirror. It reveals whether you are willing to compromise your worth or whether you are strong enough to uphold it. And here's the beauty of it: when you protect your self-worth, you not only heal from betrayal, you also elevate yourself. You attract healthier relationships. You radiate confidence. You carry yourself with a presence that others recognize. You no longer fear being alone because you know your own value is enough. And paradoxically, it's when you no longer fear loss that you gain the most, because you live with strength, not neediness. So let betrayal test you. Let it challenge your boundaries, let it question your worth, and then rise up and show yourself that your dignity is unbreakable. Refuse to barter it away for temporary comfort. Refuse to collapse your standards just to avoid loneliness. Refuse to betray yourself in response to someone else betraying you. Because at the end of the day, the greatest betrayal is not what she did to you. It's what you allow yourself to do in response. Protect your worth, and you transform betrayal into proof of your resilience. Your boundaries are not walls of fear. They are pillars of dignity. Guard them. Stand by them. And let betrayal remind you of this timeless truth: no one can devalue you unless you agree to it. After acknowledgement, after detachment, after understanding the psychology behind betrayal, and after protecting your worth with firm boundaries, the final step is perhaps the most transformative: turning the pain into growth. Because betrayal, as destructive as it feels in the moment, carries within it a hidden potential. Pain is not only an ending, it can also be a beginning. It can break you, yes, But if approached with strength, it can also refine you into someone stronger, wiser, and more unshakable than before. Psychology has long shown us that adversity is one of the greatest catalysts for growth. Trauma does not only wound, it also awakens. It forces us to confront parts of ourselves we might otherwise avoid. Betrayal shatters illusions, and in that shattering, it exposes truths about love, trust, loyalty, and most importantly, about ourselves. If you let it, betrayal becomes the fire through which your identity is forged anew. The pain of being cheated on is raw. It can crush the ego. It can shake the very ground beneath you. But here's what most people miss. Ego shattering is often the prelude to transformation. When the ego is humbled, the real self has room to rise. Many men cling to relationships as proof of their worth, as if being chosen by someone validates them. Betrayal strips that away. It forces you to stand without that external validation, to look in the mirror and ask, who am I without her? And if you dare to answer honestly, you begin to discover a strength that was there all along, strength that does not depend on anyone's loyalty but your own. Growth after betrayal comes in many forms. For some, it is the development of deeper emotional intelligence, the ability to understand your own feelings, to regulate them, to connect with others without fear or dependence. For others, it is the cultivation of resilience, the capacity to face life's storms without collapsing, to bounce back even stronger. For still others, it is a sharpening of values, the clarity to know what you will and will not accept in relationships, and the courage to enforce it. Philosophically, growth is the only meaningful response to suffering. You cannot erase what happened, you cannot rewrite the past, but you can decide how it shapes you. Betrayal may have been forced upon you, but what you become after it is your choice. You can let it harden you into bitterness, or you can let it carve you into wisdom. You can become closed off, distrusting, cynical, or you can become discerning, self-aware, and powerful. The pain will shape you regardless. The question is, will you be shaped into someone diminished or someone elevated? One of the most profound ways to turn pain into growth is to redirect energy inward. Betrayal creates a void, and many men try to fill it immediately, with rebound relationships, with distractions, with reckless behavior. But those are temporary fixes. Real growth comes when you take that energy and pour it into yourself, into your health, your work, your passions, your personal development. The very energy that once went into holding together a broken relationship can now be invested into building a stronger self. And as you grow, something extraordinary happens. The betrayal that once defined you begins to lose its power. What once felt like the end of your world becomes just one chapter in your story, a chapter that propelled you toward becoming the man you were always meant to be. You stop seeing yourself as the victim of betrayal and start seeing yourself as the product of resilience. That shift in identity is liberation. There's also a deeper layer here. Betrayal forces you to confront the reality of impermanence. Nothing in life is guaranteed, not love, not loyalty, not even tomorrow. And while that realization is painful, it is also freeing. It reminds you to root your worth, not in external attachments, but in internal strength. Because when you learn to stand firmly in yourself, you become unshackable, no matter what or who comes and goes. That is growth in its purest form, the evolution from dependence to sovereignty. Now, growth is not automatic. Time does not heal all wounds. Only the right choices do. Growth requires intention. It requires reflection, discipline, and the willingness to face discomfort. It requires that you don't numb the pain with distractions, but instead use it as fuel. As Nietzsche wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger, but it only makes you stronger if you choose to learn from it. Otherwise, it only makes you bitter." So the challenge is this: do not let betrayal turn you into a man who distrusts all women, who closes his heart forever, who hides behind cynicism. Let it turn you into a man who sees more clearly, who chooses more wisely, who stands more firmly in his worth. Let it turn you into a man whose dignity is so unshakable that betrayal cannot reduce him, only refine him. In the end, betrayal is not the defining moment of your life, it is the catalyst. The defining moment is how you respond. Will you let it shrink you, or will you let it expand you? Will you let it poison you, or will you let it purify you? Will you carry it as a burden, or will you use it as a stepping stone? Growth is the ultimate victory, not revenge, not proving her wrong, not winning her back. The real victory is becoming someone so grounded, so resilient, so strong that no betrayal can ever destroy you. That is the kind of man who rises above pain, who transforms wounds into wisdom, who turns endings into beginnings. So when betrayal comes, and for many at some point it will, let it hurt, but do not let it break you. Let it scar you, but let those scars become the marks of strength, not shame. Because in the end, betrayal does not get the last word. Growth does. Pain fades, but the strength you build from it remains. And when you rise from it, you will know with certainty you were never defined by what was done to you. You are defined by what you chose to become because of it.